Take a deep breath in and let go. Take another deep breath and let it go. Another deep breath in and we let go. It's yummy and sweet in here right now. So, this year at the center, our theme for 2023 is living out loud. And for me, this idea is really about an invitation for each one of us to learn to ask the question, what is it going to take for me to learn how to show up in a bigger way? To be more authentically myself, to stand more truly and deeply for the things that I stand for, to find my voice, to find my purpose in the world, right? You willing to find that this year? At least willing to look for it? Okay, good. So last month, we started with this idea of root and reboot. We just started with some of what are the core principles we're looking at here, right? We talked about what is God, by meaning consciousness, that thing that's looking out through your eyes, the evolution that's creating through each one of us in every moment. And then in that process, we talked about this idea that each one of us can be, if we choose, an opening for all of possibility to funnel into reality. That we get to choose through our intentions, through our purpose, through our passion, what kind of an opening we become for creation so that something greater can come through each one of us. Because what I know is that each one of us is born on purpose. That each one of us comes into this world to fulfill a purpose. And I often find that much of the discord, much of the pain, much of the anxiety, much of the dis-ease that we experience in our life is because there's something trying to come through us and we're stopping it from happening. And when we don't allow whatever it is that's trying to come through us, guess what? It gets stuck. Right? And so the invitation this month is to define curiosity as a superpower. Because in order for any one of us to figure out what's ours to do, to look at the issues of the world and figure out how we're supposed to interact with them in the highest possible way, for us to figure out what it means for God to flow through us in a bigger way or to open up to possibilities, guess what? It's going to have to start with a little curiosity. That we're going to have to be willing to look at our lives and be willing to ask those deeper questions, to step into the metaphysical queries, if you will. And recognizing that in metaphysics and science of mind, new thought, whatever you want to call this philosophy that we're teaching here, there's this idea that life is always communicating with us, that everything is a metaphor, that everything contains meaning, that everything contains a message for us if we're willing to look for it. Right? So if we ask the question, there will be an answer. But we have to be willing to ask the question. We have to be willing to be curious about what's showing up in our lives and say, what could come from this? Right? And some of you have probably heard me say, I'm a big fan of inviting us all to find the unanswerable question we're willing to chew on. Right? In Zen, they call this idea a koan. Right? There's some unanswerable question that you're just supposed to contemplate until it breaks your mind open. And when it does, something else has room to come in. Right? And so you may know that one of my unanswerable questions that I'm always asking anytime anything comes my direction is, how is this God? If God is all there is, if the universe is one seamless consciousness, then when anything comes my way, I get to ask myself the question, well, how is this God? How are they God? How is that God? My God. Right? And there's a deep willingness to be in the question, right? And it's not about finding an answer. It's about being in the mystery. It's about being willing to sit in the unknown. Because I think some of our biggest problems come up when we think we know what we probably don't know. Have you ever had an experience in your life where you found out something that you thought was true and turned out to be false? Have you ever learned that maybe you were wrong about something? It comes up for me every once in a while. Not very often, but it does happen. And in that is the willingness to not to cling so hard to our own opinions or what we think is true, but to be willing to be in the curiosity, to be willing to have our minds opened, to be willing to learn something new, to be willing to realize that perhaps we have blind spots and there are things that we cannot see. But when we're willing to look, when we're willing to ask, we open ourselves up to something more. We open ourselves up to see things we didn't see before, to think thoughts we haven't had before, and perhaps to come up with solutions and ideas that the world needs that have not been thought of before. Right? Because there's a myriad of issues that we could all choose to look at. There's lots of things that might appear to be wrong in the world. And in every one of those things, there's an invitation for each one of us to say, what good could come from this? How is this God? What is the effect of which this is the cause? Perhaps there's more unfolding here. And so whether it's the pain in our life, whether it's the diseases that come our way, whether it's the collapsing environment or the chaos of our collective political mind, whatever it is, there's an invitation in it. And I believe that whenever we run up against chaos, whenever we run up against the glitchy stuff where it feels like it's not working, it's because we're being invited to step through a portal. We're being invited to step through a moment of transition, and on the other side, there will be something else. You know, I was talking to Sky, one of our practitioners. You're coming up for me a lot this week. I don't know why. But we had Sky's 80th birthday party this week. Congratulations, Sky. And something that Sky said when we were celebrating her just really has been tickling my mind all week, which is she said, I invite all of you to live a long life with me. I plan on living a really long time. You know why? Because I'm curious to see what happens. Yes. Yeah. I too am curious to see what happens. There's a lot of interesting things going on in the world. Something is clearly unfolding, and I would really love to see where this is going. Right? And I think that's kind of brilliant, right? Because we can look at all the things that are coming our direction in our lives or in our collective and say, oh man, this thing is going to hell in a handbasket. There's nothing we can do. Or we can say, something is going on, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and I want to be part of it. Right? That's where curiosity can take us. It can allow us to look at the problems, to look at the issues, to look at the difficult things and say, you know what? There's something here, and I'm going to find it. Right? But that requires us to be willing to sit with our pain, to ask some difficult questions, and say, wait a minute, what might be being blocked here that I need to open up? What am I not allowing that could be? And one of the things that I am coming to believe in more and more and more is the healing power of our collective consciousness. And it's something I'm really curious about. What could happen if we start to recognize that we are connected, that our thoughts are connected, that our hearts are connected, that on deep some levels there's actually only one of us here, and that's what I call God. It's the one who's breathing all of us. And in this year of living out loud, I want to invite this community to be curious about what's possible when we bring our collective consciousness together. Because that's how movements get started. That's how great waves of change move into the world. Because thoughts matter. And I mean thoughts become matter. Actually, thoughts are matter. Right? We think of thoughts as being abstract, but actually they're electricity going through all this currents of gray matter in our brain. There's a physical thing happening when you have a thought. But when you have a thought and then you engage that thought with another person, that thought has now mattered in multiple minds. It is now expanded. And then when we make action on those thoughts, those little electrical signals have now multiplied, and then they show up in the world as something even bigger. And then those somethings in the world ripple and become more actions, more choices, more. And so one tiny little thought can become a wave that moves into the world. Right? And I believe that one of the ways that we as a community can practice this experience of the power of our collective consciousness is through prayer. Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind, defines prayer in the Science of Mind textbook on page 4 or 6. He defines prayer as a movement of thought within the mind of the one praying along a specific line of meditation that is for a particular purpose. So it's a movement of thought within the mind of an individual or perhaps a group along a specific line of meditation for a particular purpose. So really what he's saying is your thoughts are your prayers. Whatever's moving through your mind is a prayer. But when you take those thoughts and bring them into a deeper meditative place, a place of higher activation or elevation, and then you move that thought for a particular purpose, something can happen. And many of you also know that I've been really interested in the work of Lynn McTaggart and The Power of Eight, where she talks about the power of our collective consciousness to heal. That when a group of people focus on the same thing at the same time, something supraneurological happens. There's a phenomenon that takes place in the minds of multiple individuals at once when we focus together on the same thing at the same time. Part of me wonders if this is where the original concept of God came from in the first place. Think of our ancient ancestors, even pre-language, maybe sitting around a fire, all staring at the same focal point and starting to have these experiences that there's something more. Right? And over thousands of years, that concept has evolved into what we call God. But really, I believe that this power resides in our collective consciousness. And so, if you remember on the first Sunday of the year, we did a healing prayer ritual. Yep. We're going to do that on the first Sunday of every month, which is today. Yeah. Because I want us to engage in this experiment with curiosity that asks this question: what power resides in our collective consciousness? Because when Lynn McTaggart brought groups of 8 people together and had them sit around an individual, people started having spontaneous healings in the middle of those circles. The New Thought movement is founded on this idea that the power of our thought and our consciousness can heal our bodies and can make changes in the world. And for the last 120-something years, the New Thought movement has been really focused on the power of your individual thought. You have the power to create. It's all in your hands. And the evolution that's calling us forward is to say, yes, that's incredibly powerful, but what happens when we put all those thoughts together? Yes. And we start to activate the power of our collective consciousness. So, in just a couple minutes, we're going to wrap up this portion of me talking to you. And then we're going to have a song, we'll take our offering, and then we're going to move into a time of prayer. And I'll explain to you how we're going to do that in a few minutes. But we're going to have an opportunity for all of us to step into the center of this collective energy that we're going to build together, and all of us bring our voices, our energy, our intentions, our healing love to the people who are standing in the middle of the room. And we'll do this together, and we're going to start practicing this once a month, because I want this community to be a people who believe in the power of our collective. And the greatest way to believe it is to see it in action, is to experience it. You know, I can't tell you how many people in this community that I've been praying with recently have been coming back to me with the reports of everything you prayed for happened. And it's like everything you prayed for happened. Right? Because I'm going to remind you, if you've ever read the first 4 books of the New Testament, the stories of Jesus, Jesus never healed a single person. Every single time a healing happens in those first 4 books with Jesus, every single time. Do you know what he says to the person who he healed? By your faith, you were healed. never takes credit for it. He always puts it in the hands of the person who was healed. It's because you believed that it happened. So when we practice and when we experience it, we can start to believe. And that's where the change happens. All right? So take a deep breath. And I'm just going to take an opportunity right here just to bring us into a space of remembering that there is only one life, one healing power, one infinite consciousness, and it resides in each one of us. And so I just speak this word today to remind us to be curious, to be open, to willing to live into the mystery, to be willing to step into the unknown, to be willing to ask those unanswerable questions. Because when we're willing to be open to possibility, that is when we can allow it to come in. And so in this moment, I just speak a word of gratitude for this community, for the evolution that is unfolding through us, for all that is happening here. I just speak a word of yes. And so for all of this and so much more, let us just be in surrender, remembering that that's something greater that breathes our bodies, that beats our hearts, is at work in everything we do. So let us seek to see it more and more. So take a deep breath in and let go. Another deep breath. Let go. One more deep breath in. And say with me, and so it is.